You're listening to the StoryShout podcast, hosted by Kelsey Jones. We're a weekly podcast dedicated to destigmatizing failure and laughing at our normalcy. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to StoryShout. My name is Kelsey Jones, and I'm joined here today by Mary Davies. I knew Mary from conferences. I think we did a panel about mental health, and I think that's the first time we met in person. So welcome, Mary.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. And yeah, I was actually trying to figure out when it was, and you're right. That was, I think, in Dallas. Yeah, cool. So yeah, good memory.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that's the last in-person conference I was at. So that's why I remember.
Yeah, it would have been close to, I think, end of 2019. Gosh, time is flying.
So Mary, what do you suck at?
Oh, I suck at being in the moment. Yeah, that's my ultimate professional sucking at attitude.
I think that's such a good one because I'm like that too. And I remember one thing sticks out in my brain. And I don't know if you have a moment like this where you realize you're bad at being in the moment. But for me, I was on vacation in Greece and we were horseback riding and it was amazing. And I cried because I was so happy because there was no cell phone service. It was so pretty. But on that same, excursion, I also was thinking, where should I go next? I was already thinking about my next travel plan instead of totally embracing for the whole time, this moment. So I don't know if you have a feeling like that, or has it always been something you've struggled with?
That's actually a really cool question because I actually have never thought of it that way. Is it something that I've always struggled with? I think that in one way, it's easy for me to answer and say, yes, I've always struggled with this. But when you're telling me that little story, I go, also, I have so many moments where, I can think back as a small child. I grew up on a farm and I loved to just go out on my own and, run through the grass and climb the trees and build forts and make believe. And I think in those moments, I was truly very much in the moment for sure. But at the same time, I think that, that same little kid that I can think of that was happily running around climbing trees, I always had, sort of a bit of a fear of losing what I had. I was always sort of aware of that to some degree. I remember being adamant that, I was going to buy that farm when I could, and then I was going to live there when I was an adult, and then my kids were going to, and there was this whole sort of dream that I would have that was outside of the moment that I was in at the time. So yeah, in some ways, yes, I was absolutely in the moment, but I think I always sort of lived. I know I had said to you, the sort of discovering through this guy on TikTok saying that anxiety is sort of your fear of the future and depression is your sort of, regret of the past. And that is those two things that take you out of the moment. And I think, when I look at that in as a child, I think I had that fear of what the future meant. Would I lose this moment that I was in? So I was there, but I was worried about getting out of there too.
Yeah. That's a good point. Well, and as you're talking too, and you spoke about anxiety, I do think that that's a big part of not living in the moment. But I also think about times when I haven't lived in the moment, but it was an anxiety. So I remember as a kid, instead of enjoying my childhood, I'd always be making these grand plans for the future. So I wanted to buy horses because I loved horseback riding. I'd make a plan for what my house would be like and all this stuff. And in the meantime, I have friends and activities and all these things going around me, but it always kind of felt like my head was somewhere else. And I don't think that was bad necessarily, but, as you're describing your experience, you just think about, well, did I miss out on anything?
Yeah. And that's actually kind of cool to think about it that way, though, too, because I think you're right. Just because you're not necessarily taking in exactly where you are doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, because it's very possible that those sort of dreams of that house you might build one day or those horses you might buy one day were being absolutely inspired by the moment you were in, So I love a good daydream. And I actually think daydreaming is maybe a perfect way to sort of be in a moment. I don't know if you are like, if you've practiced meditation yourself or if that's something you're skilled at or suck at. I suck at it. I suck at it. But I do find that, mindful meditation, the principle behind it is just quite simply to be in the moment and let what's happening be there without judging it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's to have a thought and let it be and do not judge,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I get hung up, is that I immediately go, oh, I'm not supposed to be thinking about buying 10 horses. I'm supposed to be right here, but it's okay. Somebody I did a cognitive behavioral therapy class a while back that was really helpful because I was surrounded by a whole bunch of wackos like me, and we were all sharing all of our challenges and all of the things that we suck at, and what we struggle with mental health wise. And I was complaining about my inability to meditate, and we were talking about mindfulness meditation specifically, and a girl said, yeah, but the meditation is the practice. That's it. So regardless of if you're good at it or if you suck at it, you're doing it, and you're doing it perfectly well. And I was like, okay, so just don't fight it. Let it be. That's what it is. So it's hard to do that though, because we're sort of built to judge how we feel and what we think.
Yes, I love that. That's such a good point. And that made me think of this meme I saw. It was something like, yes, sitting in your car, eating fast food and listening to rap music is a form of meditation. Like essentially saying like meditation can really be something different to each person. So like for me, I love sitting in my car, and I talked about this with one of my best friends a couple months ago, and we figured out, like as moms and, we are married and have kids, our car is really the only place that's like our own thing, like because, our husbands have their own vehicles as well. So I think both of us will, and we just realized this separately, like I will sit in my car when I drive to my office because I rent a little office space. I'll sit in my car and just sit there for like 30 minutes and look on my phone, or I'll read an article. And I realize now that that's kind of like not meditation because I'm looking at something, but it is like a centering of myself almost, because it feels protective. And so I don't know, that's what I think of when you're saying like it can kind of be something different to everybody.
For sure. And I think the thing is, it's supposed to work for you. Like it's supposed to help you. So you got to find what works for you in meditation specifically. And I know that's not what we're actually talking about today, but that's what we're talking about today. I have found myself that guided meditation is a lot easier for me because there is an active sort of rule set in a way to follow. So it helps me to stay a little bit more on course. There's one called, if anybody ever wants to look it up, there's one called the mountain meditation. And there's a bunch of different versions of it on like YouTube and stuff. And it's really great. The idea behind guided meditation is that it tells you sort of what you're experiencing and seeing and thinking, but at the same time, you're feeling your own way through it. So it helps to keep me a little bit more on track and a little less wandering in my thoughts, because it's telling me where to go. So, but yeah, I think like what you're doing in the car is just like, recognizing your need for that personal space and recharging, and I think that's great. My mom used to lock herself in the bathroom with a magazine. That was it. And we could stand outside the bathroom screaming our heads off as long as we wanted. She wasn't coming out.
Yeah, that makes me think too, like being a parent, and I know probably not everyone listening is a parent, but there's times when like I catch myself feeling bad for not liking the moment that I'm in with my child. And it's not even that anything's going wrong, like he's upset, but sometimes like we'll be watching a show that he likes that I hate, or we have to do this like thing for school. And I'm like, oh my God, I really hate this. And then I feel bad about that. But it's almost like, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about that. Like I shouldn't feel guilty for not wanting to be in that moment. And it's not that and not wanting to do that doesn't make me a bad parent because I'm still there. But I think, and I guess this kind of centers around the idea of StoryShout is like being okay with our failures or whatever. So being okay with the times when you're not in the moment, when it really doesn't impact anybody else, or maybe doesn't impact your mental health.
For sure. And I think the thing is, in all honesty, I would argue that you are being in the moment when you're not liking what you're doing with your kid in those moments. Like you're fully experiencing how much you don't want to watch that movie again.
That's true. I never thought of it like that.
Like, I don't know. My kids are older now, and now I'm in the reverse where, I felt like you did when they were small, like, oh God, do I seriously, Land Before Time times 1,000,
Oh, yeah.
Can I watch this movie one more time? Or whatever. And now it's me trying to like beg them to like watch a movie with me, and they're like slogging through it on their end. Right. So it comes around. You'll have your moment where you can make them watch your movie. But yeah, no, I think, like that we should have a whole nother discussion. That would be a fun one, because I think a lot of parents think they suck at things that they don't. I don't think you're sucking as a parent if you don't like doing all of the things. Like I can't imagine how many field trips I drove, how many snotty-nosed, annoying little kids around on that I really did not want to do, but it's what I was doing. So, whatever, that's okay. Let that one go.
Yeah. Well, and I like your point of arguing that because I don't like it, that shows I'm in the moment, because that would be that makes so much more sense than like if I was on my phone the whole time and I didn't notice something in the show and then he asked me about it, and that happens too. But to say like, oh, I was mentally somewhere else, I checked out and then I don't understand it. And it's not like I watch his show like religiously and I'm not looking at my phone, but it's like thinking about it's okay to have feelings about the moment. And that's something else too. Like, I think sometimes we are pressured to appreciate everything, and the moment is so precious. It's so fleeting. It's only here and then it's gone. And I think I don't know. I don't think that's the case all the time. Like, I don't think we constantly have to be like, appreciate right now. You never know what'll happen.
Well, in my opinion, and I actually sound like I'm better at being in the moment than I am. I'm like, oh, I sound like I know a lot about this, but I suck at it.
You do.
Okay, so disclaimer, I know a lot about this, but I suck at doing it. But yeah, there's actually a book I would highly recommend. And I just had to look it up. I was like, what's the name of the guy? John Kabat-Zinn is the author, and it's called Wherever You Go, There You Are. And I was reminded of it while you were speaking, because being in the moment is not about enjoying the moment. It is about being in the moment. Wherever you are in that moment, that's what it's about. It's not, and I think some people, there's too much pressure to like enjoy and soak up, and like bad things happen. Terrible days happen. Horrific moments happen. And we need to feel them and be in them, and that's how we get through them. But I think, if you think of like your worst of worst days, they are far more manageable if you're putting one foot in front of the other and dealing with what's at hand. They're a million times harder when you're thinking about where it might go and how it might end up and how you got there and what you could have changed to avoid it, blah, blah, blah. And that's the space that I am always living in. So that's why I suck at it. I know this logically. I just don't do it well. When I'm having that day where I'm going, oh my God, I've got like way too much on my plate. I can't possibly deal with this. I immediately go into, I'm not going to be able to take any time off this weekend. I'm probably going to be up till midnight. I'm going to be so exhausted next week. And then I'm like, oh, if only I had, scheduled that differently or not taken that extra client on, or da, 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 da. That's what I do. But if I was to just sit down and go, well, here I am. What should I start on? What is my actual task at hand, and what can I do? Then I'll just be, sort of slowly ticking off the list. Worrying about how exhausted I'm going to be at the end is not going to help anybody.
Right. Exactly.
Being mad about, the stupid decisions I may have made, decided to like, go out for a beer instead of getting my work done on the weekend or whatever. Yeah. So I think it's, being in the moment is not about enjoying the moment. It's about recognizing where you are and being okay with that. I have so many like little bits of sayings and things in my head, and I never know who to like say, oh, the brilliant mind came up with this, but I have, it's in my bathroom actually on the wall. And it's basically, I think if I quote it, it's I'll do my best, but it's basically, being in a moment, it doesn't mean that there's no stress or strife or pain. It's just accepting where you are and finding peace in that. And that's the part, it's not that fight to change and run in fear from or hide in a hole, but I think, like you've said, that terminology of being in the moment feels like it's always about a positive experience. And there's so many negative, terrible experiences in a day. We can't set that as the goal. Like that just can't be. That's not reality. So
Right.
More than anything, I need to be in the moment when I'm having a bad day, as opposed to when I'm having that magical moment on your vacation. When you're planning the next one, sure, it'd be nice to sort of stay in that second rather than going outside of it. But I think more so, in those moments where you're having a real major challenge, maybe you and your partner aren't getting along very well, maybe your kid is driving you crazy, maybe you've got too much work on your plate. Those are the times where I find it is really helpful. I suffer from a fairly debilitating anxiety disorder at times, and it can really flare up. And the big thing that I've really strive to do in that is try and keep myself grounded and in this moment. So I go for a lot of walks, and outside sometimes grounds me a little bit. And I think it's that it brings you into the moment. You're looking at the squirrel running across the road and the trees, waving in the wind, and you can sort of look at what's happening around you rather than just going inside your head and getting into that, what ifs and how comes and panic. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I thought, as you're talking, I thought about, one time a therapist I had told me, like, on your hardest days, or like when something happens, like you lose your job or there's a death, you need to live through it instead of trying to pack it away and deal with it later. And that reminds me, and this pales in comparison to a death or something, but my first job out of college, I was laid off. They had laid off like 30% of the company, and it was like at 11 or something. So I had a half day, and I remember telling myself then, I'm just going to give myself this half day to like totally have a pity party and feel like a complete like sack of crap, like just like pile on like the self, beating of why it was me. And then tomorrow I'm going to get up and I am going to, apply for jobs, get more freelance clients. Like I will come up with a plan, but I'm going to give myself, these 10 hours or whatever. And then I'm going to get up and do it. And I think that was really helpful for me to do it that way.
Absolutely. I think the pushing through, sometimes we have to push through. We've all had those moments where there's no eject button in the moment. You got to push through. It's like, oh crap, I'm whatever it is. I've had those moments on stage speaking at conferences, and you're like halfway through and you can't remember what you're doing and you just want to run off and just like pretend that you never started. That's not the time for self-care. That is the time for push through.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, no, I think it is important. Like I've had experiences in my own life that I tried that sort of, shove it away approach. And all I've learned is that really just makes it grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And it's not until you sort of hit that point where you just slog your way through it and acknowledge it and give yourself the space to, be angry or grieve or whatever it is that you got to do about it. You can't really move past because it's always sort of just like haunting you in the back of your head. I remember it sort of really, we're almost talking about exposure therapy to a certain degree when you start talking that way. And I know there's there was, I can't remember who it was Olympic swimmer. I remember hearing about they were like on their way to, the world record or gold medal or whatever it was. And they ended up crossing lanes. This was a number of years ago, but they crossed lanes. And not only did they ruin their own chances, they took their competitor out as well. And just the trauma of sort of ruining this moment for themselves and somebody else. And the therapy that they used to sort of get through it was just watching the video over and over and over and over and over until they didn't have a judgment of it and they didn't have a reaction to it. And that's very similar to that mindfulness exercise, that mindfulness meditation is just letting that feeling go, through you. Let the idea pass through you. Let the thought pass through you, and don't go into that, fight or flight, protection, angry, hurt, whatever it is that we like to go into. Yeah, I thought that I like the sort of story of that one, because I think that we can apply it in a lot of different ways.
Right. I agree. Well, and I think whenever I have a bad conversation with someone, like if it's their email or text or on the phone, and it's like, it just doesn't go how I thought, or it just like went off the rails for 1,000 different reasons, I'll replay it in my head over and over and I'll make it something it's not. And then I'll find like maybe a couple days later, I'll look at it again. Like if it was a text or an email, and I'm like, wow, I totally, like my lens of the present of the moment when that was happening is totally different than how I feel about it now. Like I'm more removed from it and I can see their words. And there are times when I read it again and I get mad all over again. But there's other times where I'm like, I don't think they meant it at all. And that even happened a couple months ago. I reread like how I responded to this guy, a colleague, and I reread my email and I just cringed because the way I responded in the moment was not how I should have, because I don't think he meant it like whatever he said, passive aggressive, which is how I took it at the time. And I don't really think there's a way to like fix that in the moment, but I think just being aware that sometimes the way you see things in the moment isn't necessarily, I want to say the truth. I know that that's maybe not the right wording, but like your emotions play into your perspective of the moment. So I think just being aware of that and not trying to change it, like you said, like being aware of the fact that my emotions, I'm a human person, and my emotions, my own experiences with myself, with others, with situations are going to color how I see everything happening in real time. I think just knowing that is really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. We're human. All of us have these sort of reactionary sort of moments, and also your life story and my life story and our interactions that we've had with similar people or similar, that all colors what we're going to go into. There's certain things that, immediately, like I can see a certain name cross, my email, and my heart rates up and I'm ready for a fight, and it's just like, okay, nope. Take a pause, take a breath, and I think in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's this sort of, they're always talking about the pause, right? Taking a pause so you can go into a response zone rather than a reaction zone. It's easier said than done. We're very naturally drawn to reaction, but the more you practice it, much like, being in the moment, much like mindfulness is just sort of that. Taking a pause is one of the best things we can do for ourselves, just like, I don't know if you know box breathing or 4x4, it's sometimes called.
Yes. My mom told me about that a couple months ago.
That's a great one. Just sort of go into that and, take, even if it's just, 4 breaths, and it's like, okay, you know what, now let's reread this again. Or having a second set of eyes. Sometimes I find that that's helpful. I'll throw stuff past Dave and go, my instinct is that I'm being attacked. And then he can read it and go, I don't think they meant it that way. Right. But it's like, I'm an overly sensitive person. So I think I can feel under attack much more easily than say he would. So, and I have life experiences that sort of, inform that response. So it's not, it's not that I should just go, oh, I'm overreacting all the time and somehow I need my husband to check in with. But I think it is okay to just have a second set of eyes and to take a pause and to sort of, have a moment. I am, educating my clients on that all the time because I work a lot in the social media space. And as we know, that can be a very argumentative space. And when it comes to the, customer service responses, and dealing with like teams and sort of helping to educate them and in taking that pause and, not taking it personally and making sure that we're giving the benefit of the doubt to the person that we're communicating with and, staying calm. It helps because it helps de-escalate, things, but that's getting a little off subject.
Doesn't it feel, and this is probably like, I'm not going to say it's not healthy, but doesn't it feel so good when you feel something about a certain situation and you ask someone that you trust, like Dave, or, I'll ask my husband, Harrison, And I love when he says, no, you are right. That is so rude.
I'm validated.
I win at decoding situations.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I know, like, as I'd mentioned, we're not going into catastrophizing and minimizing because I know you've already covered that. But I'd mentioned this to you, I go to both of those places often where it's the end of the world or it's totally okay. And I'll do that where I'll downplay. And then, second set of eyes goes, oh yeah, no, you're being torn to shreds there. Actually, you should probably get in there and stand up for yourself. So I can go both ways. I can be oversensitive, or I can also be oversensitive in the space of defending, maybe someone who probably doesn't warrant it. But yeah, I don't know, like ultimately, like to try and bring it back to the being in the moment is, I think all of this really plays a part in just being recognizing what is it that's actually in front of me. And when we're talking about having reactionary responses, those reactionary responses are really rooted in our past life experiences, those moments that we've had that have built up these, maybe defenses, or maybe we're not standing up for ourselves as much as we should, or there's a lot of ways that we can come into a situation or a conversation that maybe isn't respectful of right now because we've got so much baggage, that's sort of affecting the way that we are going to, reply or deal with it. But yeah, again, I say all this stuff like, oh, that sounds great, but I'm not good at doing any of it.
Well, that's fine. That we're not here to like fix everything in 30 minutes, like we're not here to fix anything, period. And to talk about like your past experiences informing you now, 2 episodes I've recorded, if anybody listening, the one with Lisa Beyer and the one with Robin Johnson, we talk about that because I think that is something to be aware of like your current failures, I'm putting in air quotes, what you suck at is shaped by who you are as a person. And that's okay. Like, it's okay that, if you had a rough childhood, like it makes sense that maybe you react really poorly to conflict or you shut down when a giant, a man is yelling at you, which is what happens to me sometimes. Like it's okay because that's based on our past experience. And if you explained it to anyone, no one's going to fault you for that. Like if you explain to me like, oh, I had an abusive childhood, so anytime I see physical violence, I start having a panic attack. I'd be like, wow, that's totally reasonable. I get that. But then somebody in that situation might be feeling terrible. Like, oh my God, why can I not stop shaking when I see physical violence? But if you think of it from an outsider perspective, like most people would totally understand that and be like, wow, I totally get why you would have that reaction based on, what you've seen firsthand.
Absolutely. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us when we're out there being keyboard warriors and whatnot, is that we don't know the story of the person on the other side. And very rarely do people go out there and hurt people when they haven't been hurt themselves to some degree, and it's not to excuse bad behavior, but it does sort of educate us on, maybe understanding where people are coming from, but we don't really know. I was in the grocery store, it was a couple months ago, but it really just stuck with me. And a woman was just so nasty. Like I was just like walking down, and I was just like standing in front of the milk basically. And she just snarked at me. I can't remember the exact words she said, but she was just aggressive and angry. I wasn't in her way. I like nothing. She just said something really mean. And I guess I blocked that part out, but it was just so unwarranted and so out of nowhere. But I just my initial reaction was get really shaky and really upset and really bothered because that tends to be from my life experience what happens. But then I stopped and I was like, wow, like what happened in her day? Where's she coming from? I don't know what the story is, but it's not my problem. It's not mine to deal with. So I'm just going to, but, be respectful of the fact that it literally did. It shook me up and I didn't feel good about it for a while.
Yeah, I agree. And to kind of bring it back and like close our combo, I know we could talk about this forever, but is there anything, and again, we're not trying to fix anything, but is there anything you do? I know we talked about meditation, but outside of that, like if you notice yourself kind of drifting, either to the past or to the present, is there anything else you do that helps you stay in the moment to kind of wrap up our combo?
Yeah, I have a little bit of like a cheat sheet of tools, honestly. And I have a cheat sheet because it doesn't matter how many times I do them, I forget half of them. I find that when I'm in my biggest of like sort of, inability to function sort of moments, my brain just goes like mush and I don't remember anything I've ever learned. So I have a little cheat sheet that I go to and I'm like, what are the things that I know to do in this moment to help me? But as I noted already, I think one of the best things that I can do for myself is to go outside. There's something about the outdoors that just brings me into my own sort of like space. It takes me away from, if it's the desk, it takes me away from, my worst moments sitting on the couch, just sort of staring into the abyss, being stuck in my head. There's a lot of science behind, nature and physical exercise. So it's not that I just go sit outside. I go and I walk and I will walk and I will walk and I will walk. And just getting sort of some of that cortisol burn off, that we need to get rid of, and getting some of that, like just nature and the surroundings. One thing that it's funny because people would say this is backwards from staying in the moment, but I actually find helps me stay in the moment is I will take pictures of things. So I don't agree with it when you're going into the, I need to record this so that I can share it on Instagram so that everyone can see the beautiful thing I'm looking at. I don't post them on social media or anything like that, but I will notice a thing and I will stop and I will take a photo of it. And it helps me to sort of really focus in on it. So I'll notice like, oh, that's a different bird chirping, and I'll go and I'll like seek it out and I'll take a picture of it. And it actually helps me to take my focus away from all the scramble and in on that moment at that time. And there's one tool that I use probably more than anything. And it's just a simple exercise where you count backwards from 5. So you name 5 things you see, you name 5 things you feel in your body, and you name 5 things you hear. And I'll pull that one out all the time. You can do that anywhere. And it just sort of takes you out of your spin or obsession or worry or whatever it is, wherever you're going that is not in this moment, it'll get rid of it. And it will and sometimes I just go, well, it's like, that's it. I got my, 45 seconds or however long it took me. But for 45 seconds, I was in this moment. And then, if I'm decent at it, I don't judge the fact that I'm back to the spin 3 seconds later. But I gave myself a break, Yeah. And I've done that repetitively at times. If I'm really spinning, I'll just sit there and do it over and over and over and over and over. And I think it's similar to like that guided meditation that works a little bit better for me, is it keeps me, I'm an action oriented person. So it gives me a task to do to keep me in the space that I'm at. So yeah, meditation and being in the moment isn't always about sitting in your being grateful for the sunshine. Like, it's not always that. Sometimes it's literally just, I hear traffic driving by. I hear a baby screaming. I hear, that can be just as much about it, being in the moment as the lovely moments as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good tip. So if anyone wants to learn more about you or talk to you on social media, where can they find you?
LinkedIn's always the best place to find me. Mary Davies. I'm on LinkedIn. You can message me there. A bunch of people have found me there. So your chances are high. If you want to reach out, that's probably the best route.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks to everyone else listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on social media at StoryShout. And until next time, thank you.
Thank you for listening to the StoryShout podcast. Don't forget to review us on iTunes and connect with us on social media at StoryShout or online at storyshout.co. Until next time, stay normal.